Welcome to another episode of our personal empowerment audio program, Finding Yourself in Paradise. Hi, I'm Michael Benner.
And I'm Steve Snyder. And our program today is what I like to think of as the big three of negativity: negative thoughts and feelings you have about yourself, about others, and about the future. We're going to call this one criticism, cynicism, and pessimism.
What we're looking at, of course, is attitude, defensiveness and response, why people think the way they think and feel the way they feel. And, of course, it's always less risky to judge other people, so we'll do a lot of that today. Pretend people, hypothetical people, but we want you to bring it home, too. That's the whole point as we go through a lot of negativity today. Take a look at what it's reflecting and that whole it takes one to know one concept. I know that's sort of grade schoolish, but I think there's wisdom in it takes one to know one. How would you recognize that? Why did that attract your attention? Or even if somebody makes you angry, do you ever stop and say, why does that make me angry? How did they get under my skin? So ultimately, we want to go past simply the idea that negativity is done to you and understand that it's really coming from you.
Yeah, I remember a long time ago, a friend of mine told me that if your words can hurt me, then there's something in me that needs to be healed. You know, because words are not like dangerous in and of themselves. There's got to be a sore spot inside of yourself. So the negative thoughts and feelings you have about yourself is that self-criticism, that putting yourself down, that regret, that remorse, that remembering the embarrassment kind of stuff. And negative thoughts and feelings you have about others, we're calling that cynicism. Is it like they're not good enough, or they're not as good as me, or they're stupid, or they're wrong, or they're this or they're that. And then there's this whole area we spend time living in the future, worrying about what could be, you know, negative thoughts and feelings like basic pessimism, what could go wrong, imagining what could go wrong, and even to the point where it becomes outright hopelessness.
Well, let's do it in order. It starts with the idea of criticism, and yeah, you can be critical of others, but as we've already hinted, how would you know? Why does that bother you so much? And aren't you really being self-critical? So to start in the middle and work our way out, why are we critical of ourselves? And not just critical, but sometimes really, really negative, even self-loathing. And, of course, I think there's always an element of confusion in that. It's not that you're dead certain that you deserve to be thought of in such a negative way. It's that you're just not sure. You don't really know, and I think that's where the confusion comes in.
If you think about it, when you're being critical of yourself, you're really not being critical of what you're going to do in the future. You know, you're not down on yourself for something you haven't done yet, and you're really not being critical about what you're doing right now, because then you're being conscious. If you're in the moment, being aware of what you're doing right now, that's a much higher level of consciousness. You're being critical of stuff you already did. You're being critical of your past. And most people go there with their negative thoughts and feelings about themselves, things they did, things they said, things they wished they would have done differently, regret, remorse, embarrassment, shame, those places. And what we're doing is we're allowing our ego to continually remind us of things that hurt us before, so that theoretically we would be aware of those things and not do them again. The point is, the ego, which is so afraid of those things that hurt it, that make it feel embarrassed or ashamed, because there's like danger in that to the ego, because it's confused by it, it's preparing us, like, remain conscious of these possible perils so that if you encounter them in the future, you won't do them. The problem is the ego's so confused, it doesn't understand that by continually reimagining these things, what we do is perpetuate them in our lives.
This is part of a conundrum that we've talked about before, and I'm sure we'll discuss again in the future because it's so common. It's the idea that being afraid somehow makes us safe. It's a crazy, backward, upside down, and inside out idea.
It's so confusing, but it's so real for so many people.
Well, yeah, it's you know, Lao Tzu said all truth is found ultimately in paradox of one kind or another. Life has its yin and its yang, and its polarities. And most people never even consider this, but once you've begun to consider it, it still takes some work. It's like softening cold clay, putting some warmth into it before you really can begin to get your brain around the tendency that we have. All of us. I mean, the temptation to believe that holding on to fear, tight muscles, shallow breathing, and negative self-critical thinking is somehow going to lead to safety. But that if I just allow myself to feel safe, well, no, that's way too dangerous. That would scare me. I'm not used to that feeling. So safe is scary, and scary is safe. Now, it's so common, it's so popular, it's so prevailing, and yet on its surface, what? That's upside down.
It is. However, if you look at the origins of it, it's because we, humans that are alive today, are descendant from the most paranoid. That is, those human beings that lived 20, 50,000 years ago that, felt safe, that they just let down their guard and they got killed by wild animals before they made babies. And it was those that were paranoid, that they were watching out for danger in every possible moment. Even if there was no danger, they were being paranoid there might be danger. They lived long enough to procreate. They lived in a world where any day you could get killed by predators, by wild animals, by warring hordes. So it served human beings for much of our history to be in this state of the only time I can feel safe is when I'm being scared, The problem is, of course, we live in a different world now that's not dangerous. It's incredibly confusing, but it's not dangerous. So the paradox is, for most people, the only way I can feel safe is to feel like I have my guard up. Watching out for bad things that could happen to me, that's the only way I can feel safe. The problem is when you have your guard up and you're watching for bad things that could happen to you, you don't feel safe. So it's finding a way to feel safe and let your guard down. And that's something the ego can't do. That's something you have to put the ego aside. You have to take it out of the driver's seat and put it into the passenger seat riding shotgun and let your higher self emerge, because that's the part of you that can actually feel safe.
You know what else I think it is, Steve, is a way of buffering the fear of being perceived as arrogant or pompous or conceited, that if I am self-critical, that will help me stay balanced, because I don't want to think I'm too good or too pretty or too smart or too powerful or too much of this or that. It makes people uncomfortable, and then nobody's going to like me at all. So we have to play this odd little game of being confident or pretending that we're confident, but at the same time, careful, you don't want anybody to think you got a big ego.
Yeah, because then you'd think they won't like me, and that's, the worst possible consequence that the ego could have is because then we're making more people into enemies. We're making more people into danger to us. So the bottom line here is that you have this wonderful ego that does a good job of protecting you against real danger. It's just on red alert all the time, and it needs to bring it down to yellow or maybe even orange. We need to bring the alert level down because the danger is less. And one of the things we do, because we think the danger level is high, is we self-criticize. We remind ourselves of those things that hurt us in the past to make sure we don't experience them again in the future. But again, that perpetuates them. So what we have to do is let the ego know that I regretted doing that thing I did. I regretted that. Now I know I'm not going to do that again. I don't have to keep reminding myself of that. There's no value in it for me to continue to remind myself of that thing that I regretted, because I already got the lesson. Oh, that thing that embarrassed me, that thing I did that I'm ashamed of, yeah, I got it. I got the lesson. I'm not going to do that ever again, and I don't have to keep going back to the feeling of that. I can take away the power of the feeling. Now, understand, you can take away the power of the feeling and let the thought, the memory of it, that it happened, remain. You're not going to wipe it from your mind. You'll remember it happened. It's just when you go back and remember it, it's without the shame. It's without the feeling of remorse or regret, because you learned the lesson from it. You made a mistake like every human is entitled to do, and you learned your lesson, and now you're moving on, and now you can remember it once in a while, but you don't have to keep going there with the regret, the shame, the remorse. And that's the self-criticism stuff. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not, and all that stuff we can start letting go of because we've learned the lesson, and now we can move on.
Yep. That's self-forgiveness. To forgive yourself is to say, well, I don't have to hold on to this hurt anymore. I can put it down. I don't need it to remind me that I hadn't learned the lesson, because, as you said 3 or 4 times there very clearly, the secret is to learn the lesson, to understand. Oh, I get it. Well, now that I got it, I can let go of the pain. It was only there as a little sticky note, albeit an uncomfortable sticky note, just like physical pain is a symptom of an injury or an illness designed to get your attention, right? Symptoms are how both physical healers and mental healers and spiritual healers work, looking for those symptoms. And that's why this negativity, this self-criticism needs to be faced. Seek to understand yourself. Remember, if it hurts, it's not that you know that you're bad or weak or wrong or stupid or ugly or whatever. It's that you don't know clearly the truth of your strengths and maybe some areas that aren't as strong as other areas. We're unique. Vive la différence, right? So obviously, if you're going to have special talents and skills and gifts, there'll be a few other areas where you're not as good as other people, for example. The funny thing is, when you get real about it, when you use paradise thinking, you'll find that what you're good at lines up perfectly with what you love to do. And the areas where you'd have to work really, really, really hard to be that good tend to be, usually, things you're not all that interested in anyway. And you begin to realize, more through feeling than thought, though there is a mental discernment here, who you are based on both what I love to do and what I'm really good at.
So in letting go of self-criticism, from a logical standpoint, you look at the fact that if you've learned the lesson from those experiences, re-remembering the feelings is of no value to you. It does nothing. It cannot change the past. You can think them a million times. The past, exactly what happened, continues to be what happened. There's no changing the past. So putting your energy into self-criticism is putting your energy into a futile experience of a past you can't change. What we need to do is start thinking positive about ourselves in the now and in the future. There's no need to even think positive of ourselves in the past because the past is gone. Let's start thinking positive of ourselves in the now, being approving of what we do and who we are and what we're becoming in the now, and imagining that into the future. So the key to negative thinking about yourself is it's all about the past. Do it once, remember once, go over those experiences that have been plaguing you and bothering you. Release the pain from them by breathing deeply into them. Release the pain from those experiences. Hold on to them only as memories, not as emotional experiences any longer, so that you can move on into more positive thoughts and feelings about yourself.
Many of us are resistant, especially if we've never done any kind of therapy or self-improvement or personal growth work in our life, any counseling situations where we really had a chance to get introspective. This whole process can be a little bit difficult, facing your fear and even accepting what is good and wonderful and magnificent about you. It can almost be embarrassing, like the deserving issues that comes up when somebody congratulates you or thanks you publicly or wants to give you an award or something, and we all get, oh gosh, shucks, golly, am I worthy? I didn't really do anything. Well, maybe you did. Maybe you did something wonderful. How are you going to receive that? I find what works for me and a lot of my clients is to consider the inner child as the part that's most lovable and most deserving of being forgiven. And think of yourself, anytime there's a problem or an issue, with experiencing the hurt, and through that process, redeeming it, really, through the understanding that Steve's described, a feeling. There's a saying in the field, it's true, you've got to feel it to heal it. Just last week we did a program, Resistance is Futile. When you resist feeling it, that's when it really hurts, when you get stuck in that. Breathe, let go, face it, and consider the child within as being then loved and loving and lovable. Because if I told you to sit in front of a mirror and do this exercise, you'd be very resistant. But if I had you imagine yourself at 3, 4, 5 years old, you can do that even now. Remember yourself, even if most of it's imagined. Remember yourself. just before you went to school. And think how easy it would be to forgive that person and allow that person, that part of you, to feel the love, to feel the warmth, and then it can spread easily into all the other parts.
Because as you do heal that inner child, and that child basically begins to feel safer in the world, and you begin to feel safer in the world, then not only does the self-criticism fall away, but so too does some of the cynicism, some of the negative thoughts and feelings you have about other people. Because that's born out of that same place of that child, that innocent child that feels endangered, that feels frightened of the world. So letting go of regret, remorse, embarrassment, and shame opens up the possibility not only of forgiving yourself, but being, I think, a little more forgiving of other people too. Learning to tolerate other people, letting the small stuff go, not making mountains out of molehills, being, more able to deal with the difficulties in dealing with other people, being better at that because you have a better relationship with yourself.
So that's a pretty good segue into our second big negativity of the day here. We're talking about criticism and now cynicism. Again, this same law of mind that what the self describes the self is in play here. A cynical person is quite transparent. But there is a cruelty in being cynical. It's such a negative thing. It's almost an evil, I think. It's like corrosion or decay. Certainly in nature, those things have their role, but to have a mentality that looks at the worst in other people, not as if it could actually see the worst in other people, what it's often looking at is a projection of its own dark side, and this bizarre anticipation that the person they're judging at the time is as bad or maybe even worse. Lord knows how they lie, cheat, and steal. Don't you know? Everybody's life is a lie. Nobody is trustworthy. Lots of people really believe that you can just fake it. Might even be the President of the United States if you write crib notes on your hand like the 8th grade. Pretty easy to delude yourself or be a person who is really out of touch. And the cynics, the ancient Greek cynics were pretty hip guys. They just were fed up with the corruption of the aristocracy and the ruling class. Yeah, they called it a democracy, but like the neocons of today, there was clearly a ruling class, and there were slaves, of course, as well. And women, obviously, were not included, so small d democracy, I suppose. But the cynics were just people that were fed up with the corruption, with the temple taxes, and they were just very intelligent people that could see through the veil. But today, when we use the word cynic, small c cynic, it's sort of a nihilist. It's a person that doesn't believe in anything. Nothing works. It's a very dark energy to carry with you, and it influences other people, too. It's no fun to be around a cynic.
Not at all, and I think it's born out of an emotion we don't often talk about, and that's real hatred. And that's hatred for self, of course, projected out onto other people. Hatred is really very similar to love. I mean, the opposite of hatred is not love or love-hatred. The opposite of both of those is indifference. Hatred is a passionate feeling. And when we have that passionate negative feeling about ourselves and project it outward, we create cynicism. And there's so much of that in our world today. There's so many people who most of what they're talking about is how bad other people are, how wrong other people are, how inappropriate, and spending their lives thinking about how, not really that I'm better than them, but that they're worse than me. It's not really building me up, it's a putting them down. Underneath that, there may be the need to build oneself up. But it's focusing mostly on how bad and wrong other human beings are, how much you hate people because of this belief or that religion or that color or whatever it happens to be. And really what it's projecting out is such a great hatred for self. Now, underneath the hatred is a great wound. Underneath the hatred is a great injury of some sort. And underneath that, of course, is a tremendous fear. Ultimately, it comes down to some kind of fear experience that caused them to be so terrified that they move into this great passionate experience they call hatred.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question that cynicism or as I suggested before, nihilism or hatred, you're calling it, really preys upon, looks for hurt in your life and then preys upon that. Says, see where you were hurt there? Why would you believe there is any justice in this world? Remember that other time and nobody cared and you were all alone? Well, why would anybody care now? And it's a negative loop in your brain. If you want to understand it electrochemically, think of it this way. Every time a particular thought with its emotional feeling entwined occurs in the brain, a particular neural net fires electronically. And every time that same thought goes off, the electrical resistance on that circuit goes down. So it's like water following the path of least resistance. And these negative loops, these cynical loops, or just the self-criticism and self-loathing we've already discussed, just become paths of least resistance, habitual negative thinking, which can even pose as an identity.
Right. Some people basically live in the identity of how they are unique and special, the whole Aryan race concept that Hitler came up with, that my people are different and better than anybody else, and the hatred that that's born out of. Now, that cynicism, that putting down others, that need to take away any humanity from them, it really comes down to calling them less than human, making other people less than human. And that justified everything from, hanging them and drawing and quartering them and tar and feathering them and whatever it is, evil things human beings chose to do to each other. It's because we somehow hate some part of ourselves so much that we project onto others that they are even less than human. So this cynicism that some people have, what's the antidote to cynicism? What's the antidote to somebody who's being negative all the time, who's being constantly putting things down? Is oddly enough, paradoxically enough, to find something they're saying to agree with. Because if you agree with anything they're saying, you're no longer the person they want to be talking to. They're looking for somebody to push against. They're looking for somebody to fight. They're looking for somebody to argue with. And if you agree with something and stand without fear, like a dog senses fear in another, stand without fear and just find something to agree with, then you diffuse their intensity, their passion, which builds on your fear or your disagreement.
I was thinking about the art of argumentation the other day and what makes a discussion an argument. And I've decided it was unnecessary repetition in large part, and then that leads to emotional anxiety, and people just flip out from there. But the idea that I state a position and you state a different position, and because most people are binary in their thinking, any difference would seem to be an opposite. So by expressing a different opinion, you now have required of me to defend my position, which I do, but then you feel a little defensive now as a result of that. And then we go back and forth and start repeating what we've already said. If we could avoid repeating what we've already said and move forward, it wouldn't be an argument and people wouldn't get hostile in it. They'd be interested in what the other person is saying. And I think you're right. I think that is a nice little antidote for cynicism. What if you genuinely cared about other people? Or what if you considered the possibility that there just might be something in everybody that you could be a little interested in, and it's your mission, should you decide to accept it, to find something interesting, something intriguing, if you will, something you could acknowledge that's positive and productive and life-affirming in that other person. I think your faith in humanity might begin to eat away at that cynicism.
Yeah, it really changes the way other people perceive you when you step onto their side of the table instead of standing on the other side of the table arguing with them. With a cynic, with a person who's coming from an emotionally based experience of hatred, you're not going to change them with rationality. You're not going to use logic. Their argument's not built on logic. Their argument is built on emotion. So the only way you can change them is to diffuse their emotion. That changes their behavior. They become less violent. They become less histrionic. chaotic if you diffuse their energy, and you do that by agreeing. You build their energy by disagreeing and fighting them and letting them build and use you as a foil, and you diffuse their energy by agreeing. I mean, we talked a lot about this in that wonderful show we did, Dealing with Difficult People. We talked about the three basic kinds of difficult people: people who are really angry, people who are really negative or pessimistic, and people who are really sad or depressed. And with angry people, you show no fear. With sad people, you get them to get out of their own head by helping other people. And as we're saying now, with negative and pessimistic people, find something to agree with, and you diffuse their passion.
And let me take that segue and go into area number 3. This
Perfect.
is your idea, your construct, that we talked today about the big 3 negatives. Is that the way you described it?
Yeah, the big 3 of negativity.
Okay,
I
good.
like to rhyme things.
Criticism and cynicism, and now just pessimism in general. This is really, now we're really coming close to nihilism.
And this is like negative thinking about the future, about everything's going to go wrong. It's hopelessness at its outside.
And again, doesn't that reflect you? You know what the mystic Jacob Boehme must have meant when he said what the self describes the self. Or we were talking about the Honest Nin quote the other day about seeing the world not as it is, but as we are. That's that same idea of life being a reflection of our attitude and consciousness. So to change the world, change the consciousness, change your perception of it. In our newsletter last week, talking about this program, we talked about the William James quote from 1902, that we're not fixed by genetics and childhood nurturing alone, that we can change our attitudes and deliberately, consciously change who we are, grow and evolve and aspire to become whoever we wish to be. Again, drawing on this wonderful alignment of, isn't it amazing that what I really am interested in and the stuff I really love to do is what I'm naturally good at anyway, and where I find my gifts and talents similarly is in those same areas, things that I love to do. I think that suggests some kind of design, or this is the character that stands above and beyond ego.
So when ego emerges in terms of looking at the future, what it's saying is, I want to protect us from being hurt. So let's look at what could go wrong. And so whenever ego's in charge, it does that paradox thing of, I can't feel safe unless I feel my guard's up. Unless I feel nervous and anxious and worried, I don't feel safe. So when dealing with the future, there's no value to ego, because the future's not truly dangerous to you. The future cannot hit you or kick you or drop an atom bomb on you right this moment. The future can't do anything bad to you. So using the ego to protect you from the moment is appropriate. Like when there's something real dangerous has happened, the guy in front of you slams on his brakes on the freeway, you want your ego to be able to signal to the autonomic nervous system to, fight or flight kind of thing. And the ego's real good for dealing with real danger, which can only be in the moment. But in dealing with the future, there's no value in using the ego. So whenever we're dealing with the future, being out of the now, we want to do that in a place where we are relaxed and feel safe. We don't want to do that when we're anxious and nervous. When we're in the moment of anxious and nervous, that's not a time to start thinking about the future, because that limits our abilities to be creative and intuitive and imaginative. It locks us out, and it starts us focusing in on what could go wrong, and that's going to lead us to that. So what we need to do is understand that this negativity we have about the future, this hopelessness, this things are going to fall apart and go wrong, has its place. There is great value in worrying once, as we've often said, in preparing for worst case scenario. Being a Pollyanna about it, pretending nothing bad's ever going to happen, is stupid. But spending most of our time thinking about what bad could happen is even more stupid.
Yeah, the only thing negative thinking is good for, and it doesn't last long enough, ideally, to be pessimism, is getting off dead center, especially if this is an emergency or an urgent situation. It's like, get me out of here. What direction, sir? I don't care. Just
anywhere but here.
Yeah, I just want to go away from trying to avoid what I don't want. It's a great initial strategy, run in any direction. But eventually you're going to have to reorient yourself, you see. You can't say, here's my list of goals, all the things that I don't want to happen. And yet, isn't that where you're putting your attention? Don't we feel at times like the little Dutch boy trying to hold back the dike and he's running out of fingers because every time he plugs up one hole, another one bursts out, and you know this dam is going to break. It's important that at some point we let go of that whole effort and turn around and look forward and to be optimistic, to know that if the 16-ounce glass has 8 ounces of fluid in it, it's up to you whether that's half full or half empty. And if nobody's ever talked it through with you, or if you've never reflected on it, spend some time. Although it's a rather trite example, it's really profound. Look at what happens when you see the glass is half empty. What direction is it moving in? Less and less and less. But if it's half full, what direction are you moving in? More and more, better and better, bigger and bigger. And so optimism, of course. Not starry-eyed, blue sky, wishful thinking, but true optimism, feet on the ground, but your head in the sky, that kind of optimism.
Pessimism has that same paradoxical argument to perpetuate it. It says, well, if I prepare for the worst, if it happens, I'm ready for it. And if the best happens, well, heck, I could deal with that. But if I prepare for the best and the worst happens and I'm unprepared, that would be horrible. So there is a certain paradoxical logic to pessimism. So we handle that by what we say when we say worry once. Pick the worst case scenario. You could not possibly plan for every contingency. So pick the worst, know that you can handle that, and figure if you can handle that, you can handle anything less than that. And then whenever the worry thing comes up for you, you can release it by taking a deep breath, letting it go, and then moving your mind into something positive. What's the value in positive, optimistic thinking? Twofold, really. One is it makes you feel good now. It feels good as you do it. And two is it heads you in the direction that you want to go. Pessimism has two negative aspects to it. It feels bad now, and it heads you in the direction you don't want to go. So there's no real good logical argument for pessimism. There's great logical arguments for optimism, but either way, whether you see it as a logical argument or as an emotional experience, the mind wants to go to what feels good. The heart desires to go to things that feel good, and the bigger, better it feels, the more it wants to go. The heart's not moved by small dreams. It wants big, giant, wonderful feelings, and so just because that's the natural thing the heart wants, it's because it's the healthiest thing for it.
I think Mr. Spock would be proud of you, Steve, for using such a well-reasoned, logical argument to promote optimism.
Thank you. One of my great heroes. In fact, truly, for many, many years, since the 60s, if I have a problem to solve or decision to make, and I've tried logic, and logic doesn't work for me, my logic, I close my eyes and I invite Mr. Spock to help me solve my problem. I invite Edison and Einstein and a bunch of people, but Spock's been one of my standbys since the mid-60s. And of course, I know this only works when I'm in paradise in Alpha, because in my normal waking state, I know this is just Leonard Nimoy, and I'm not looking for help from a Jewish actor. I want help from a Vulcan with a big brain from another planet. He only exists in my imagination.
Yeah. Imagine you call upon the superhero and the actor shows up with his SAG card like he's going to do something. No, it's the we still have to do that show on enchantment.
Oh, I like that.
Power of enchantment. There is a risk as we become smarter and more oriented toward science and technology that we lose the magic of enchantment, of wonder, of
comic books and baseball cards for me.
Stuff, wishing on the star and dreams come true, and if you believe you can fly, you can, and all of that. That's a very powerful allegory, and it's ancient.
That doesn't mean jump off buildings.
No.
If
metaphor.
A great
it's
suggestion.
Metaphor.
If you believe you can fly, start from the ground. just start from the ground. Jump from the ground. See if it works first from there.
Let's go to Alpha. This is the paradise place of reflection, of introspection, of contemplation, meditation. It's a place we go to feel safe and relaxed. It's a place we go to by feeling safe and relaxed. And so it's all about imagination. Breathing, take a nice big deep breath, and as you exhale slowly, feel yourself letting go. And if you're not sure you're actually feeling it, you're just making it up, well, tell yourself that was exactly right in any event. And then do it again, 2, 3, maybe 4 times, and at your own pace. Nice, slow, deep breathing, and especially on that exhale side. Make it a sigh of relief, a sigh of release. Create and sense that letting go feeling.
And notice it as it comes from the ground into the bottom of your feet, a sense of being grounded in the earth. And notice as it moves up from your feet into your ankles and calves and up into your knees and thighs, and feel it, just feel it, moving up through you, all the way up, into your arms and hands and fingers and fingertips, all the way up, through your chest and back and shoulders and neck, all the way up, into your face and up through the top of your head, all the way up. Feel the energy move through you. And as you do, you realize that this feels like paradise. And you take a deep breath and release and intensify, amplify this place of perfect peace. Because here it becomes clear there is no fear.
The best thing that anyone can say about negativity is that you can let go of it. You don't need to conquer it or kill it. You don't need to defeat it. You don't need to win anything. You don't need to scrape it off the bottom of your shoes. You can just drop it. Self-loathing and criticism doesn't serve you. As you understand that, you can stop dragging it from the past into the present everywhere you go. And then anticipate it'll be waiting for you in the future as well. You can just drop it. And so for cynicism, which you now understand largely reflects you too, understand it, you can just let it go, put it down, leave it here. And pessimism, the idea that it's always going to be this way, always has been, always will be. As we approach nihilism, believing in nothing at all, not even in believing in nihilism. Understand it. See the strategy in it. How you thought it was a pretty good idea. Why it's been appealing to you. The way in which you've used it to protect yourself from fear you thought, until you recognize this is fear itself. And using fear, anxiety and stress and negativity to protect you from fear, anxiety, stress, and negativity makes no sense at all. So put it down. Drop it right here.
And feel the sense of release, replaced by inner peace. Whatever you're embarrassed about or regret or feel shame, whatever it is, holding on to that emotional pain, whatever it is that you feel you need to explain over and over again, well, inside your mind, let it end. You got it, you learned it, you know it. You'll not do it again. So release the embarrassment, the regret, the shame. Let go of all remorse. Just open up and feel safe about your past. Release it from the source. And feel safe to release your cynicism, your negativity about other people too. Feel safe to give them the benefit of the doubt, to let them do what they do and be who they are and act the way they act and behave the way they behave. You're not on the planet to change them. You're not on the planet to save. You're on the planet to understand, to appreciate, and to approve. So change your thinking, get out of that rut, and get into a positive groove.
This is more than a decision you make. It's a feeling, emotional, physical, spiritual feeling that you can bring with you as we reorient ourselves toward the room you'll see when, a moment from now, I ask you to open your eyes and just transition the feeling of having released negativity, having released self-criticism, cynicism, and pessimism, and emerged with this feeling, with this warmth, with this sense that it's safe to be who you are, where you are, right now. Imagine bringing with you a sense that who you are, where you are, right now, is really, really safe. A place so safe that you feel loved and loving and lovable as you inhale deeply. Fill your lungs, hold for a moment as you peak and as you exhale. Open your eyes, wide awake, alert, rested and refreshed, and back in the room.
Feeling great. Of course, as you release these negative traits, these critical traits, these cynical and pessimistic traits, it's got to be replaced by something. Something good is going to come in where the bad stuff goes out. So that's a wonderful thing about the balance of the universe. As we release the negativity, we embrace the positivity. So feeling positive about yourself. It occurred to me as I was thinking of this particular show that the negativity we have about ourselves is really about our past, because we're not really being critical about what we're doing in the moment, because as I said, we're not conscious of if we're conscious of what we're doing in the moment, that's what we're conscious of. So, and it's really not about what we're going to do. That's worry. The criticism we're doing is about what we did. And so we can't change that. There's no value in spending a whole lot of time there. The ego wants to go there to make sure you don't repeat your mistakes. So assure yourselves that you got the lesson, that you got it. I don't need to go there over and over again. And when it comes to being cynical about other people, I think that comes from being afraid of yourself, and you begin to heal that begins to heal inside, and then the overall pessimism thing goes away as you start to become hopeful. And that's what you replace this pessimism with, is hopefulness. Now, that doesn't mean that you're guaranteed positive things are going to happen. And being free of the cynicism doesn't mean that you're not going to be discerning. It doesn't mean you're going to say yes to everything or to everybody. It just means that some of that anger, and underneath that the hurt and the fear, some of that dissipates, and you replace it with feeling safer in the world, because ultimately that's what we need to do to feel safer. It's not like we need to do anything, really more we need to undo some things, and undoing those things that are causing us to not feel safe begins to allow us to notice that, hey, the world is safe, and I don't have to be on alert 24/7 at all.
I want to remind you folks also that we've begun a new social net site. It's a lot like Facebook, only it's for people like you who are interested in topics like this. For our listeners, for our subscribers, for our students, for our clients, and for people who are really interested in personal growth, success, and fulfillment. Like Facebook, it's absolutely free, but it's a community, and there's discussion groups, there are event notices you can post, there's a MP3 player, you can post videos and JPEG photos and all kinds of cool stuff. different ways to network with like-minded people all over the world. And we've just launched it in the last week or two. So check it out at theagelesswisdom.ning.com. The Ning is Nancy, I-N-G, N-I-N-G. So it's our sister site, The Ageless Wisdom. Include the T-H-E, the W's dot theagelesswisdom.ning.com. And sign up and sign in, and we'll see you there.
And you'll see each other there as well. And understand, some of you have been listening to us for decades. I mean, we get letters and emails from people who have been listening for 20, 30 years to the stuff we're talking about. Between the two of us, Michael and I have more than 80 years of experience in researching this field. We've got now 120 shows on 120 different topics in our catalog. And essentially, we have done the research for you. We've read all the books. We've interviewed all the people. We know this field, and we've done our best to lay it out week after week after week in different kinds of episodes about thinking, about feeling, about mind, about body, about heart, about life.
And remember that these programs are not copyrighted for a reason. We encourage you to share them. And so part of you being a subscriber at $3.96 a month, 99 cents a week, is use this gadget we put in the built-in player on the website. Once you log in, right below that built-in player is a send one to a friend gadget. Use that. Give them away. It won't cost you a thing, as often as you want, especially to people you think of as you're listening to a particular program. Follow those promptings. Trust those intuitive hits. They're coming to you for a reason. This person is looking for this kind of information. Hook them up at focusedpassion.com. Remember the ED, it's the W's.focusedpassion.com.
And take a moment and imagine what the world would be like with a whole lot less criticism, cynicism, and pessimism. Isn't that a nice thought?
As always, be gentle, love life, and take care of each other. For Steve Snyder, this is Michael Benner. Aloha from Maui.